B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Moed Katan Daf. We're going to start 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Aleph Amud Beis. Tonu Rabbonon, we're going to continue the halachas of Avelus. Ovel, somebody in mourning. Gimel Yomim Arishonim, Bo Mimokim Koroiv Moine Imohen. What's going on here? One of the relatives of the deceased didn't know that his relative had passed away, and only when he joined and he came to the place of the burial, the place where they were sitting Shiva and mourning, he came there and he suddenly heard that he's also a novel. So if he came within the first 3 days of the Shiva, and he was close enough, he was Mimokim Koroiv, and which Rashi says was a distance of a day away from where the mourning and the burial took place, then then he can continue counting with the other mourners, which means if he came on day 3, then he can just, even though for him it's the first day of mourning, he can count that as day 3 and finish at the end of the week with everybody else. However, if he was far away at the time, then when he arrives, he's got to count his own 7 days, starting when he arrives. When he hears about the news, he's got to start counting then his week of Shiva. Mikan ve'elech, if somebody who was close by but came after 3 days from the burial, from the beginning of the Shiva, even if he was close by, he's got to count his own 7 days, and he cannot just count with those that were there that started at the beginning. That's the Tanakama. Reb Shimon Omer, afilu ba b'yom hashvi, even if he came on the very last day, on day 7 of the Shiva, mimokim koriv, but he was close by, he just didn't know that he was an oval, and he joined the other mourners on the last day, moim, he can count his very first day as day 7. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar, and now we're quoting part of that brisa. We saw in that brisa, Gimel Yomim Arishonim, that if he came within the first 3 days, Bo'mi Mokim Koriv, and he came from a close by place, Moim, he counts with them. Which means that he, so to speak, just is annexed on and becomes just part of them. That means it's almost as if to say that the main part of the Shiva is the people that were sitting, and the people who knew about it and were sitting from the beginning. And he's just lagging on to them. Omer Rabbi bar Abba, Omer Rabbi Yechanan, was said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, V'hu sheyesh gadol habayis babayis. If the oldest sibling or the oldest person in mourning was there in the house mourning with all the other people, then this other person who now joined within the first 3 days is joined onto them. If, however, it was the oldest, the gadol babayis, it was the oldest one that came late, then there's no reason the older brother or the oldest sibling is not going to be annexed and tailed on to the younger ones, and therefore he counts on his own. They asked it in the Beis Medrash, they asked a question. Holach Godel Abayis, what happens if the oldest, let's call it the oldest sibling, went Lebeis HaKvoros, went to a faraway place, together with the coffin, to the cemetery to bury him? Mahu, what's the halacha? And he stayed there, Rashi says he stayed there for 3 days. Mahu, do we say that it's as if, since he went with the coffin, for the sake of the coffin, then it's as if he started Shiva with the people who stayed behind? Because the people who stayed behind, we're soon going to see, the people who stayed behind, they start counting as soon as the coffin's out of sight and leaves the city. However, the people that go with the deceased person, their Shiva only starts after the burial. But over here, since this oldest brother left with the coffin, with the corpse, for the sake of the corpse, he wasn't doing something else. He was going there for the sake of the niftar, to the burial, to the Beis HaKvoros, to the cemetery. Do we say that he's still annexed onto those that stayed behind or not? Tashma, even if it was the oldest brother, the Godel Babayis, who went to the Beis HaKvoros, moin, he can count with the rest of the family. Asks the Gemara, moin? Yeah, can this oldest brother, who's now, or oldest sibling, who's coming much later to join the rest, but because he went for the sake of the burial, it's as if he can count with those that stayed behind? Did we not see in a brisa that that he's got to count for himself. He can't just carry on counting as if the Shiva started with all those that stayed behind, when in truth for him the Shiva may have started much later, after the burial. Says the Gemara, Lo Ikashi, it's not a contradiction. This state says that he can count with them the Osa Begoit Losa. That's if he came back within 3 days. He can join with them. And this day it said in the Brisa that he has to count his own 7 days from the beginning, is Deloy Osa Begoit Losa. That's if he didn't come within 3 days. Kihad Omalu Rav Lebnei Hatzalfoini. Rav said to the people of Tzalfoini, the Osu Begoit Losa, those who are joining the Shiva within the first 3 days, Limnu Ba'adaichu, can count the Shiva with those who started at the beginning. Deloy Osu Begoit Losa, for those who didn't come within the first 3 days, Limnu Nafshayu, they have to count the Shiva days on their own and start counting when their Shiva starts, as we learnt. Rava said to the people of the Bnei Bechayza, Atun, you, those who stayed behind in the city and didn't go after the coffin, as soon as you've turned your faces away from the gates of the entrance of the city, you start the Shiva now. But those who are accompanying the coffin till the burial, they will only start the Shiva, or the Shiva for them only starts after the burial. Reb Shimon Omer, Afilu ba b'yom hashvi mimokim korev moinei moim. We saw in the Brisa we started with at the bottom of Daf Chafalef Amud Beis. Reb Shimon holds that if a person joins the main Shiva house even just on the 7th day, then it's as if he can count with them, and that's his last day, even though it's his first day. Omer B'chia bar Gamda, Omer B'yisi ben Shaul, Omer Rabbi. It was said in the name of Rabbi, V'hu sheba'u motza menachmen etzloi. Because this is an interesting point. We've learnt that on day 7, then miktas hayom kukuloi, and in the morning they start sitting, and they start the 7th day with sitting Shiva. People come and console them, but as soon as the people who were there in the morning have left, that's it. The Shiva's over. So if this person is going to come and join, according to Reb Shimon, this mourner, the sibling is going to, or whoever's this person is joining onto the Shiva, is coming on the 7th day, well, maybe the Shiva was over by the time he arrived. So that's what Rabbi said, that's provided that when he comes, there are still people who are being menachem with Etzloi, with him, with the oldest brother, with the people sitting in the home, and that means the Shiva's not yet over. If he joined before the end of the Shiva, he can just finish the Shiva with them. Rav Onon asked, what happens if the people that were there, and as soon as they've risen to leave, their Shiva is over? What happens if they haven't actually stood up? They're just like shuffling in their chairs, about to stand up, and this person walks in. Ninaru, if they were stirring, lamoid, with the intentions of rising, v'layomdu, but they hadn't actually yet risen. Mahu, what's the halacha if this person walks in at that point? Is it as if he came before the Shiva was over, and he can, so to speak, count with them, and his Shiva will be over in just those few minutes? Or no, since they've already planned and intended to get up and go, the Shiva is considered over, and he came too late, and he has to start counting his own 7 days. The Gemara says, Teiku, we have to let that stand unresolved. Continues the Gemara. We just saw from that Reb Shimon holds that if somebody comes on day 7, providing the Shiva is still going on, he can count together with those that were in the Shiva the whole week. Gemiri Chavrei de Reb Abba Barchia Mireb Abba, the friend, the colleague, so to speak, of Reb Abba Barchia, he had a tradition and was learning from Reb Abba. Umanu, and who was that friend of Reb Abba Barchia? Reb Zera. V'amri, and others have a different version, and they say it was Chavrei de Reb Zera. It was the friend or the colleague of Reb Zera that was receiving Reb Zera, that was receiving from Reb Zera. And who was that? Umanu, Reb Abba Berei de Reb Chia bar Abba. And what did they learn? Whoever it was, whether it was Reb Zera or whether it was Reb Abba Berei de Reb Chia, whoever it was, what was the tradition they were learning about? Omer Rabbi Yochanan said as follows: Halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifus. There's halacha in treifus, which is a certain blemishes. It's not really a blemish, certain illnesses and issues with an animal that render it treif, he's not allowed to eat it. V'halacha k'Reb Shimon ba'ovel. The halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel regarding treifus, we'll soon see what that is, and the halacha is like Reb Shimon in Hilchas Havelus, and let's see what that means. Reb Shimon ba'ovel, what does it mean that Rabbi Yochanan said that halacha is like Reb Shimon ba'avelus? Ha'da'omran, it's this Reb Shimon here, that if one of the people find out that they're in mourning when they arrive, and they arrive on day 7, for him it's considered day 7, even though he just started. So that's this Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifus. When Rabbi Yochanan said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel regarding treifus, that none we learned in a Mishnah. Could be this is a brisa. B'nei me'ayim, if the intestines of an animal, shenikvu, they became punctured, v'leicha soismoson, and there's some mucus that's sealing up the hole in the intestines, ksheira. Divrei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says this animal is not a treifa, it's kosher. My leicha. What is this mucus, or what is this substance that is going to seal up the hole in the intestines? Rav Kahana says it's a shirka, type of a sticky liquid, the ma'aya of the intestines, the nofik agav duchke, that comes out through pressure, and it was this liquid that blocked up, that sealed up the hole, and then Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said it's kosher. Omar mandahu, someone said, whoever said, we don't know who it was, and said, Izki, it would be my desire, it would be a merit, v'asik, that I would go up, v'agmar l'shmaita, and I would learn this quote that was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, either by Reb Zera or by Reb Abba, mipumei demori, from the one who actually said it, which is the chaver of Reb Abba being Reb Zera, or the chaver of Reb Zera being Reb Abba, as we saw before. Kisolik, when he actually went up to Eretz Yisrael, Ashke Chel Reb Abba Bereid Reb Chia bar Abba, he found Reb Abba, the son of Reb Chia bar Abba. Omar Lei said to him, Omar Mar, is it true what you said? Halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifus? That the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel regarding treifus, as we saw, that if the intestines became punctured and then the hole got sealed with this mucus, that it's kosher? Omar Lei answered him back and said, Ano, I ain't halacha omri. I said that halacha is not like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel regarding treifus. So then he asked him again, Reb Shimon ba'ovel mai? What about the other part of the statement that of Rabbi Yochanan, that the halacha is like Reb Shimon regarding ovel that we're discussing here? Omar lei pluktaninu. He said that's actually a machloikus where the halacha is like Reb Shimon. De itmar Rav Chizda Omar halacha. Rav Chizda said the halacha is like Reb Shimon. V'chein Omar Rabbi Yochanan halacha. Rabbi Yochanan also said the halacha is like Reb Shimon. Rav Nachman Omar ein halacha. Rav Nachman said the halacha is not like Reb Shimon. And the Gemara is now concluding, V'ein halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifus. Regarding treifus, indeed, the halacha is not like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and this animal with the punctured intestines is treif. V'halacha Reb Shimon ba'ovel, and the halacha is like Reb Shimon, the lenient opinion regarding avelus. The Omar Shmuel, this is again Shmuel that we've seen a number of times in the Masechta already. Halacha k'divrei amekel ba'ovel. When it comes to hilchas avelus, the halacha is like the more lenient opinion. Continues the Gemara. And this is now going to be a long brisa differentiating between somebody who's mourning over the other relatives, brother, sister, son, daughter, wife, or somebody who's sitting shiva, who's mourning for a parent, a father, or a mother. And there's going to be a number of differences, a long brisa, and intermittently the Gemara is going to interject with some Amoraim who are going to come to town on one or two of the details and work on it. Al kol hameisim kulon. If a person is sitting shiva for all the other 5 mesim, those 5 relatives, then madchem mitosoi, if somebody hurries to do the burial, hareza meshubach, is something which is it's preferable, it's praiseworthy. Al oviv al imay, however, somebody who's going to bury a father or mother, hareza meguna, it's not good that he's rushing, because you're supposed to take your time, and in order to be able to eulogize and not just be in such a quick rush to do the burial. Hoyo Erev Shabbos, however, if it's Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov, and he's afraid that if he delays, then the burial will be postponed for that length of time till after Shabbos or Yom Tov, that's certainly not good. Hareza meshubach, then even if it's a parent, it's praiseworthy, because it's the honor of his parents which is making him rush. Another halacha, al kol hamesim kulam, for the other deceased, that means the other 5 relatives, when they pass away, If he chooses, he can limit or lessen his business activity. And if he wants, then he doesn't need to cut down on the business activity. And Tosfos and Daf Chav Zayin is going to discuss, but an ovel's not allowed to do any work. What's going on? What does it mean? The Rishonim are going to discuss it. However, when somebody's mourning for a father or a mother, then in that case he must minimize the activities he's doing in his business. Another halacha, al kol ha-meisim kulam, on all the other 5 relatives, when they pass away, rotza chayletz, if he wants to, he can reveal his shoulder. Rotza ein chayletz, and if he chooses, he can choose to keep his shoulders covered. Al aviv al imay, however, when tearing one's clothes, doing kriya, renting one's clothes for a father or mother, chayletz, then he's required to reveal and to bare his shoulders. Umaisa begodol hadoir echad. There was an incident with a godel hadoir, shemeis aviv, that the father of the godel hadoir passed away. Ubikesh lachlitz, and he wanted to reveal his shoulder. Ubikesh godel hadoir acher, and the different godel hadoir who was present at the time wanted to, she'imoy, that was with him, lachlitz, wanted to do the same, maybe in sympathy, in order just to be with him in his pain of that godel hadoir. V'nimna v'lo cholatz. So in order not to get confused, we have Godel Hadoir and we have Godel Hadoir Imoy. We had the Godel Hadoir who was in mourning for his father, and Godel Hadoir Imoy, which is the Godel Hadoir that was with him, who wanted to also reveal his shoulders. V'nimna, and the original Godel Hadoir, in order not to put the Godel Hadoir Imoy through the pain or the anguish of having to reveal his shoulders, so the Godel Hadoir himself refrained v'lo cholatz and did not reveal his shoulder. And now the Gemara is going to interject here. Omar Rabbi, we have to now determine who was the Godel Hadoir who was in mourning, who wanted to do the cholatz, and who was the Godel Hadoir Imoy that was the cause that the Godel Hadoir didn't do the cholatz. So Omar Rabbi, Godel Hadoir, who's the Godel Hadoir? That was Rabbi. Godel Hadoir she'imoy, who was the other one? That was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, which means that Rabbi was mourning for his father, and Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha was going to reveal his shoulder with Rabbi, so to speak, to feel with Rabbi, and that stopped Rabbi from doing this. V'ikadamra, others say no. Godel Hadoir Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. The Godel Hadoir that was actually mourning was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. Godel Hadoir she'imoy, the other Godel that was with him, was Rabbi. Now, who was Rabbi? Rabbi was the son of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, which means that if it was Rabbi who was the Godel Hadoir, then who passed away? Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, his father. If, however, the Godel Hadoir was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha and Rabbi was just the other Godel, then it was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha's father, Acha, who passed away. So, and what's the difference if it was Acha that passed away or Rabbi's father, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Let's see in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Bishlei melemando amar Godel Hadoir she'imoy. If the other Godel was Rabbi, which means who was the actual person in mourning, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, Hainu denimna v'lo cholatz. We can understand Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha refrained from doing the cholatz in order to stop Rabbi having to do it with him. Elo lemando amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha. But if you're going to say that the Godel Hadoir imoy that means the other Godel Hadoir was Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, so who was the Godel Hadoir that was in mourning? Was Rabbi. And Rabbi then refrained from doing cholatz in order to prevent Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha having to do it with him. Amai nimna, why did Rabbi refrain from doing the cholatz? V'lo cholatz, why didn't he do it? Because who passed away? His father, Rabbi's father, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Nasi Hava. Was he not the Nasi of the whole generation? And since Rabbi's father passed away, so Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, who would have revealed his shoulders, was required to do it anyway, just by virtue of the fact that it was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel that passed away. So why did Rabbi not do it? Says the Gemara Kashya, indeed, that's a question. On that opinion, it's a question. Let's continue the Brisa. Al kol ha-meisim, for all the other relatives that pass away, kol ha-meisim kulam mistaper, you can have a haircut la'achar lamad yoim, after the shloshim. Al aviv al ima, if it's one of his parents that pass away, then ad sheyigaru bo chaverav, until his friends shout at him, they reproach him, and they say, your hair is too long. Only at that point is he allowed to cut his hair. Another halacha, al kol ha-meisim kulon, for all the others deceased, nichnas lebeis hamishteh, he's allowed to go into a home of celebration la'achar lamed yom, but only after the shloshim. Al Oviv al Imoy, however, for a parent, la'achar yud beis chodesh, you're only allowed to go into beis hasimcha, in a place of celebration, only after 12 months. And now the Gemara is again interjecting. Omar Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana says, this that it says that for all the other relatives, not including a parent, he's allowed to go into a beis hasimcha after the shloshim. Rabbi Bar Chana says, Ula simchas mereus. That's only true with a type of simcha, a type of celebration which is called a friendship celebration, a type of celebration that friends would make together. And there we say that after the shloshim, for providing that he's not mourning for a parent, if it's another relative, then after the shloshim you can go in. But a real simcha, not just a simchas mereus, a real simcha like nisuin, like a chasna, there, even if you're mourning other relatives, you're not allowed to go in there even after the shloshim. And the Gemara asks a question on that. Meisvei, ula simcha, ula mereus. Did we not learn in a brisa that also for simcha, which is a home of celebration, ula mereus, and the celebration of friendship, in both of them, la'achar lamed yom, you're only after. Meisvei asks the Gemara, did we not see in a brisa, ula simcha, ula mereus, also for going into a regular beis hasimcha, a celebration, and for the simchas mereus, which is just the celebration of friendships, in both of them, lamed yom, it's only osa for the first 30 days, and after the shloshim, providing it's not for parents, then after the shloshim, one is allowed to go in. So you see that even for regular simcha, simchas nisuin, after the shloshim, one's allowed to go in. Not like Rabbi Bar Chana said. Answers the Gemara Kashya, indeed it's a question. Ameimer had a bit of a different version. Omar Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana said as follows: Ula simchas mereus muter likones lealtar. This that we said that you're only allowed to, again, not for parents, but if somebody is in mourning for a different relative, this that we said before, that after 30 days, after the shloshim, you're allowed to go into a beis hasimcha, said Rabbi Bar Chana, that's only a regular simcha like a chasna. But simchas mereus, but a lower level simcha called simchas mereus, which is just the celebration of friendship, muter likones lealtar, you can go in even before the end of the shloshim. Asked the Gemara, Vatanya, did we not learn in a brisa, the simcha shloshim lemereus shloshim, that also for simcha, also for mereus, only after the shloshim you're allowed to go in? Says the Gemara, Loikasha, this is not a contradiction. Because these friends, this Sudas Mereim, because we have a contradiction. Are you allowed to go into a Sudas Mereim, a Simchas Mereim, before the end of Shloshim? We saw here, according to Rabbi Bar Chana says, it was mutter. The brisa that's quoted, it's asa. Says the Gemara, no. Because this Simchas Mereim, this Sudas Mereim, how did it work? One person initiated a meal and invited everybody. And the way the custom then was that after that, all the other people would take turns to repay that meal and make a meal to reciprocate. So the Gemara says, Lo ikasha, ha ba'arisusa, ha ba'puranusa. This that it says that within the shloshim, then a person shouldn't go to such a meal. That's only if it's the initial banquet, the initial meal. You didn't have to make that banquet now. Don't do it in shloshim. Ha ba'puranusa, but when it's just reciprocating a suda, which is something you have to do, not something you're choosing to do, it's just that's the way things work. You have to make such a meal. Therefore, you're allowed to do that even within the shloshim. If he's not in mourning for his parents. Continues the brisa, al kol hamesim, for all the other types of deceased, excluding parents, al kol hamesim kulon kirea tefach. When he rents his garment, he doesn't need to tear more than a tefach. Al oviv al imoy, but if he's mourning for a father or mother, ad she'igale es liboy, then if a tefach was not enough to expose his heart, he has to tear his garment until his heart is exposed. Interjects the Gemara with an Amayra Omer Bavo, my kra, what would be the source that the minimum size of kriya is a tefach? Because it says in the pasuk, Vayichazek David bivgodov, David took hold of his garment, Vayikroim, and he tore it, V'gam kolo anoshem ashi'itoi. So you see there that tearing one's clothes is something which you do by taking hold of the clothes. To get hold of it, to grab hold of it, you need at least a tefach. and this would be a source alluding to this halacha that kriya is a tefach. Continues the Brisa, Al kol hamesim kulon afilu lovush asoro chalukim. When somebody is mourning for any other relative, then even if he's wearing 10 shirts, he's only allowed to tear the outermost one. You're not allowed to tear clothes just for no reason. It's baltashchis, but the outermost clothes is the one. The outermost shirt is the one you tear. Al oviv al imoy, but if he's mourning for a parent, kireas kulon, he's got to tear all of them. V'apikrususoi, but the kerchief which is draped over his shoulders, there eino ma'akeves. There it's not necessary to tear that kerchief which is over his shoulders. It's not one of the clothes that he's wearing. And says the Brisa, echod haish ve'echod isha. There's no difference between a man and a woman regarding kriya. It doesn't matter if the person in mourning is a male or female. Reb Shimon ben Elazar seems to argue with that and says there is a difference. Because a man tears his clothes, and if it's for a parent, he has to reveal his heart. He says no. Ha'isha, if it's a woman, and it's inappropriate for a woman's her chest, her heart to be revealed, so what does she do? Kira says hatachton. She's wearing 2 layers of garments. She first, underneath the outer garment, she tears and rents the inner garment, and then and then she turns around the inner garment, so the tear is now at the back, and the part at the front of her is whole, is not torn. And now she can tear the outer garment, and it will not reveal her heart, because it will not reveal her body at all, because of the lower garment, which is the part that was not torn, is now at the front. Another halacha, al kol hamesim kulam, for all the other deceased, rotza mavdil kamei sofa sheloi rotza eine mavdil. Typically, a garment would have a neck slit, which is just an opening for the neck. Is a person allowed to just continue that opening and tear it a little bit lower down, another tefach, and say that is my kriya, or does he have to tear a new tear beyond the neck slit? So for all the other mesim, rotza mavdil kamei sofa, if he wants to do the kriya and separate the garment, which means tear the garment beyond the neck slit, that's fine. Rotza eine mavdil, if he wants, he doesn't have to, he can just continue the neck slit. However, al oviv al imoy, for a parent, mavdil, he has to do a separate cut, a separate tear, because it's got to be very evident by everyone that there's 2 openings here. There's the slit for the neck, and besides that, a separate cut, a separate tear for the parents. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol kriya she'eino mavdil. He says that any tearing where you're not making a new slit, you're just continuing. That means there's eino mavdil, you don't make a new separation, kamei sofa sheloi, beyond the neck slit, eino elo kera shel tiflis. It's just a useless tear, because if you just continue the neck slit, another tefach, you can't tell that it's kriya in mourning at all. It just looks like the neck slit is a little bit further down, and therefore it's useless. And now the Gemara interjects, Omar Rabbi Avo, my Talmud Rabbi Yehuda. What would be the source of Rabbi Yehuda that any kriya must be a new independent tear? It says in a pasuk, ve'elisha roye v'hu metzaik ovi rechav Yisrael u'farashov v'loi ra'ohu oid vayichazeik bivgodov. He took hold of his garments, vayikroim, he tore them, lishnayim kroim, 2 tears. What does that mean? The Gemara is asking, Mimashma shenema, from the fact that he says vayikroim, that he tore it, ein yodea, do I not know shem l'shnayim, that there's 2? You tear something, you've got one half on one side and one half on the other side. Elo says the Gemara, shenirin kruim kishnayim. It's got to be evident and clear that there are 2 tears here. There's the opening for the neck slit, and besides for that, an independent cut and tear for the kriya in mourning. Says the Brisa, another halacha, al kol hamesim kulam, for all the other deceased, excluding parents, then afterwards, then what does he do? He's got a garment that's been torn. He rent his garment as to conform with halachos of shiva, of kriya. Then shoylil la'achar shiva. At the end of the shiva, he's allowed to make a temporary repair to the tear. And he can properly sew it la'achar shloshim. After the shloshim, you can sew it up and business as usual. However, when he rents a garment in mourning for a parent, till the end of Shloshim he's not allowed to do any repair. After the Shloshim he's allowed to do a temporary type of repair. But he's never allowed to permanently and properly sew it back together. Another halacha, or continuation, however, a woman who is mourning, immediately after she tears it, and some say it's immediately after the burial, she's allowed to immediately do this type of a temporary repair, because it's inappropriate for a woman to be with rent garments, it's not in her honor. Ki also Ravin, now there's another few halachas in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Ki also Ravin, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Rabbi Yochanan, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who was in Eretz Yisrael, Al kol ha-meisim rotzo kerea b'yad, rotzo kerea b'kli. If somebody is in mourning for other relatives, he can either tear and rent his garment with his hands or with an instrument. Al oviv al imay, however, for a parent, b'yad, he has to rent his garment with his bare hands, not with an instrument. Another distinction in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Al kol ha-meisim kulam, for all the other deceased, all the other relatives when they pass away, mibifnim, then he's allowed to tear his clothes, that means his real garment, out of sight of the public. Whether it's out of sight that they can't see because of where he's doing it or how he's doing it underneath the cloak, either way it's allowed to be mibifnim, out of sight of the public, the actual act of tearing. However, al oviv al imoy, when he's renting a garment in mourning for a parent, korea mibachutz, he should do the tearing, the renting, in front of everybody. It should be revealed. Omer of Chisda said, v'chein l'nosi, when one has to rent, as we saw before, when a nosi passes away, then there are many halachas that are similar to when a parent passes away. And says of Chisda, v'chein l'nosi, when renting one's garment, when the nosi passes away, it's got to be revealed and exposed, the act of tearing. Asks the Gemara Meisvei, did we not learn in the Brisa, lo hushvu la'oviv u'le'imoy, when did we compare the Av Beis Din, his Rebbe, and a Nosi? When do we compare the restrictions or the halachas of mourning to those of a parent? That's only regarding resewing the garment at a later stage, that we say that in the same way as for parents, one's not allowed to properly resew the tear, so too for Av Beis Din, for Rabbi, and for the Nosi. So, my love, afilu le-Nosi. Can we not assume that even the Nosi that's mentioned in that Brisa is also included in this disclaimer or in this limitation, that he's only compared to parents only regarding Ichui, but not regarding the requirement that the tearing should be done in a public fashion? Says the Gemara, Loi, lebar minosi, that regarding the Nosi, we don't say that it's only compared to parents for the Ichui regarding resewing, and not regarding the publicity of the act of tearing. That's for all those mentioned, Rabbi and the Av Beis Din, but regarding the Nosi, that wasn't said, because regarding the Nosi, he's similar to parents, even regarding this halacha, that he's got to do the tearing in public sight. So continues the Gemara, Nasi Shachiv, the Nosi passed away, Omer of Chisda, Rav Chonon Barov of Chisda then said, Kfei asita, turn over a mortar, v'kum alo, and stand on top of it, v'ach v'kriya le'alma, and show that you're doing kriya in front of everybody. As we said, that v'chein le'nosi, one does the kriya in public view. And in Mirz Hashem, in the next year, we're going to continue from here.